Hello, everybody. My name is Erin George. I'm the Director of Community Development here at the City of Bozeman. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your day to join us. Please note this meeting is being recorded, so anyone who missed it is able to watch it later. We will post it on the project's Engage page for future reference. So today's info session is about the technical compliance update to Bozeman's community plan. So if you may or may not know, here's a little bit of background to get us started. State law previously required Bozeman to adopt a growth policy and to review it every 5 years. The last time we updated our growth policy was in 2020 when we adopted the 2020 Bozeman Community Plan. Chris will talk more about this in a minute, but the Bozeman Community Plan is our 20-year plan for the city. It sets the vision for land use and zoning and all the necessary infrastructure and facilities to support it. It also sets goals and objectives within 7 key themes for our city, providing the policy framework which adopted regulations and codes then implement. We were planning to do this review and update in 2025 on the normal 5-year cycle. However, as you may or may not know, a couple things happened that changed this schedule. The 2023 state adoption of the Montana Land Use Planning Act, which kept the 5-year timing, but added new requirements for the plan and renamed it a land use plan. There's a deadline of May 2026 for compliance with MLUPA. The UDC update, our Unified Development Code, which many of you have been involved with, was previously slated for 2023 adoption, but it was paused by City Commission that fall due to requests from the public for more time. So we restarted the UDC update in fall of 2024 with 6 additional months of public engagement. So due to the UDC project delay, the staff time and the funding that was planned for the growth policy, AKA now called land use plan, had to be repurposed for the UDC project. So in short, we spent the time on that project, and now based on those shifts in schedule and funding, the land use plan update had to be limited in scope to only those newly required elements to comply with state law in time for the May 2026 deadline. So we'll be presenting the same information tomorrow night at City Commission. Tomorrow's commission meeting, if you haven't heard, is a 4 o'clock start. It's noticed that way on the website and in the public notice. It starts with a budget item relating to property tax mills. But the second item on the agenda is actually a follow-up on a couple of UDC items. And then the third item on the agenda is information about this community plan update. It will be similar information to what we're presenting today. We are also hosting an in-person version of this info session this Wednesday at 6 p.m. at the Bozeman Library Community Room. So again, we'll be presenting info and there'll be opportunity for Q&A there in person with staff and possibly a few commissioners, maybe also some board members. There is a separate Engage page for this project where we've posted these and other upcoming meeting dates. I didn't mention the Community Development Board. That's the other meeting that will have this similar presentation. That one is on September 8th. We will also post presentation slides, reports, and data on that Engage page as we go. So today in our info session, if you have questions as we go, put them in the chat and we will answer them at the end. So now I'll turn it over to Chris Saunders for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate you joining us this afternoon and hope you find this helpful and informative. As Erin mentioned, this is a technical compliance update for our land use plan. And we are doing this because of some changes that came out of the legislature in 2023. The city is a charter government, meaning we have a little bit more latitude, but specifically the state does require us to follow state law directly for land use planning. So we are within that set of horizons. The new types of information are required, and we are also going to be updating some existing information that was previously included. And then also there's a variety of changes that will need to happen in a plan to remove outdated references to statute and update procedures and things like that that have shifted over the last 5 years. For just a little bit of an overview, the Montana Land Use Planning Act lays out the entire process. It, for the first time, brings subdivision and land use planning and zoning all under one bill. Previously, there were three different parts and had not been particularly well coordinated. The new MLUPA explicitly strives to coordinate those. So outlined in the purple there on the screen is the stuff we're talking about today. The issue plan, as you see there in green, that is what we used to call a facility plan. That's a name change in the statute. And so the issue plans provide data that support the land use plan, and the land use plan provides prioritization and other supportive information that supports the issue plan. So there's definitely a feedback loop back and forth between those different activities. Some examples of issue plans, if you're not familiar with them, recently the city adopted its new parks plan, the Parks, Recreation, and Active Transportation. We did a stormwater master plan and a wastewater collection system master plan, all in the last couple of years. One element, just for clarity's sake, the land use plan and issue plans are not regulatory. That's an explicit statement in state law. And so we do need to move forward once the plan has set the policy and identify the standards and regulations that will implement it. As Aaron mentioned, we have created a website for the project. This is under the overall web umbrella of engage.bozeman.net, where the city places all of its engagement for major projects. And so you'll not only find the community plan technical compliance update website there, but also the Unified Development Code and many others that the city is actively working on. And we invite you to participate in any or all of them as you have interest to participate with. On the website, we will have information on the schedule, frequently asked questions, documents, and data will be getting posted as it gets assembled and made available for public review. So quickly, what is the community plan? It is a coordination tool. It connects a lot of different documents. The city has over 24 issue plans in one form or another, and so we use the community plan to help pull them all together. They also mean that we don't have to try and put every single detail into the community plan. As you can imagine, that would be an extremely unwieldy document, be in multiple thousands of pages, and be very difficult to use. So the community plan allows us to streamline some of that data, not have to dive into so many details. That information does remain available through those issue plans. Kind of as an example that we've used from time to time in conversation, if somebody was planning a vacation and they decided that they wanted to come to Montana for that vacation, they would have really narrowed down the scope of what they wanted to explore in individual areas, but there is still many decisions yet to happen and refine the details, and that's similar. The community plan is kind of like deciding we're coming to Montana, and then the regulations boil down to the details of, you know, where might we want to go for lunch or a hike or something like that. And this will be the 8th community plan that the city has done. They've gone by different names over the years and was first adopted in 1958 and have done them periodically ever since. So some detail, I'd like to run through what the plan currently contains and where we might expect to see changes that might happen in this update. First of all, the outer boundary. The planning area is about 70 square miles outlined in that blue line. The city limits shown in white are about 22 square miles. That planning area allows us to coordinate multiple city plans, including our utility plans, other kinds of service area plans, allows us to coordinate with Gallatin County and help to communicate expectations if landowners choose to annex, and also to think about if we go these directions, what kinds of consequences may come from that. Montana Land Use Planning Act does require evaluation of identification of locations for future housing and employment and other kinds of needs. And so we do look both at possibilities for outward expansion as well as what might happen on the interior of the city. Just for clarity, everything that's inside the blue line but outside the white is still under the control of Gallatin County. It's not annexed. It is the plan is advisory, excuse me, only out in that document. And so the sheriff's office would reply to an emergency call, or county planners would review development in that area outside of the city limits. We do not have any proposal to change that boundary with this technical compliance update process. So there are 5 chapters in the existing document. First one, basics, kind of gives you the plan overview, lays out the concepts and general structure of the plan. Does have a variety of statistics in it. We'll be updating those so that they are accurate to current times, and also modifying some of the description of the process to reflect the work that's happening now. The second chapter is the themes. You heard Aaron mention those. We have 7 of them. These are the highest level ideas that are embodied in the plan. Each of those themes connects to additional information, goals and objectives that identify more detailed aspirations for the city, things we want to do, things we want to accomplish, the place we want to be. And it also connects to other relevant issue plans that may influence that particular theme. And so we will be planning on updating those relevant plans to reflect newly adopted documents, but we are not planning on making substantive changes to the theme titles or the goals or objectives that lay inside of those. The third chapter is the land use chapter. So this is where you find not only the future land use map as shown on the screen. This is from the existing document. And then there are some detailed descriptions, several paragraphs long, that describe each of the color bars that you see there that represent a specific expected land use. This is pretty high level. There's a lot of individual zoning districts that can typically implement each of those. And so that would be the next step down. So we would expect there to be amendments shown on the future land use map. The City Commission has modified through the growth policy amendment process several elements, and so we'll need to update the map for that. We'll update the map for the updated city limits, and we'll be modifying the correlation with zoning table there to reflect the draft UDC and the zoning district names that are adjusting with that process. Chapter 4 is on implementation. Plan does not have as much value as it could if it is not carried out, or if you can't measure the impacts to see how things are proceeding. And an implementation plan for the land use plan is a required component under the Montana Land Use Planning Act. In our previous plan in 2020, the city adopted a variety of metrics associated with each theme to help track key indicators over time. There was a specific list of actions that were identified also in this chapter to implement specific goals and objectives that the city had selected. One element that the state law requires us to do is to ensure that our zoning map is consistent with our future land use map. That is not something that will be happening with the technical compliance update, but that is something that is a component of the Unified Development Code update. So that is actively happening, but as a separate project, and that will be coming out after the update for this document. So both of them, we expect to see releases in September, but the land use plan will come out first. The city has been maintaining a variety of tracking tools as we've moved along since we adopted the plan in 2020. This online dashboard that you see here takes that series of metrics that I had on the previous slide and provides ongoing information about that. That dashboard is available if you go to the city's website, bozeman.net. If you go to the community development page under departments, and then select planning. Then you can see the button for the Bozeman Community Plan, and it will bring this up and you can go in and explore the information that has been gathered over the years related to this. One other activity that the city has done is an annual report that's presented to the Community Development Board, the advisory board that is responsible for working with the community plan, and then also made available through the city's website to anybody else who has an interest in it. And we expect that latest report will be issued early in September this year. And then finally, under the amendments and review, that's the last chapter. This describes both how the plan itself is modified and also how subdivision reviews occur and how zoning amendment processes work. This is a chapter where we expect to see a significant amount of change to reflect the differences in the state law that have occurred. All three of the processes for zoning, subdivision, and planning were modified, and so we need to catch up with all of that change in state law. So do keep an eye on this particular chapter. And then the last element of the printed plan are the appendices. This is where there's a lot of the documentation that supports the rest of the document. We decided to have it as a separate document back in 2020 so that the primary document was a little shorter, a little easier to manage. We found that that was the document people were most interested in, but we did have the appendices created and attached and available to the public so folks could see where the information came from. And this also is one that will see a significant amount of shift as we update for new planning documents that the city has adopted, additional data that the state requires now, and just generally updating the data that is in back of the plan. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. So the state, in their state law changes, identified 7 different kind of high-level subjects that they grouped the information that we needed to provide. So many of the required content elements are provided by other issue plans like the economic development strategy, like the community housing action plan that the city has already adopted. There's also data available through a variety of state agency maintained websites, information on schools, natural resources, population and job data, some information on city websites, so community development, infrastructure viewers, sensitive lands, other publicly available information. So we are going to make that available either as a document, if it's a document, or as a link to the website, if that's appropriate, as part and parcel of the appendice updates. And the data here at the land use plan is broad strokes. We don't try to predict, for example, where the next school might need to be placed or other things like that. We are looking at what are the general trends for the community as a whole. If you want to look at the next level down, each of the documents that I mentioned are available and will be linked through the materials that are going to get assembled into the plan, and we encourage folks to engage with those documents, and then also as they are updated in turn with their future cycles. So a few bits of information on things that have been changing, not in the document, but in the community, and as we expect the community to be modified. So looking at our annexations, since the last plan was adopted in 2020, the city has continued to grow, however, perhaps not as much as some folks might think. Sometimes we see property annex, and then it may wait for quite a few years before somebody begins to develop it. And so folks think it may be new when it may be old. So looking at our map here, there were 27 individual sites that were annexed in the last roughly 5 years, adding up to about 680 acres. 15 of those were closing holes within the city. You can see some of those scattered across. So we are growing inward as well as outward. And one thing I'd like to call out, if you can look at the left side of the image there, you'll see the westernmost boundary of the city. There's a little orange rectangle there. that north-south line has expanded north and south, but it hasn't moved west since 1997. And that's a direct connection to some of our utility planning work and the efficiencies that come from a compact development pattern that the city has advocated for a long time. So you may see a fair amount of development there along Gooch Hill Roads and Points West, but those items are all out in Gallatin County, not the city of Bozeman. So just so we're all aware of that. Looking at projections, the city contracted with a firm called Economic and Planning Systems. They work with the city and have for many years to help us to track population, housing, and other economic data. There is a report available on the Engage Bozeman website that includes this. That is a draft, so there will be a few final minor changes, but it is there for review now. You can see was a pretty big dip in the construction and tourism, resulting in a large dip in the overall jobs activity in the city, along with the COVID impacts that hit. That has clearly since recovered and moving forward. Bozeman has been significantly influenced in its job, both numbers and types, by access to high-speed internet, a very highly functioning airport that gives us access to the nation and frankly the world far above what might be expected for a community of Bozeman's size. Support of development of other communities like the Big Sky area has also had a significant influence on the city's jobs profile. And then also, last but certainly not least, we do have a top-tier research university that allows technology transfer and other activities that support our economy. And so looking as we go forward, we do see that there will be a continued growth in employment as the years go along. When we look at the population, that's a little more interesting. Expected population can vary for a lot of different reasons. And we asked EPS to prepare a variety of alternatives because we know there can be a lot of variables that change how a community may develop. And certainly outside events, as we saw with COVID, can have a very dramatic effect on the city of Bozeman and others. National trends affect us like they do other communities, so we have some but not exclusive control over our community. The three lines that we have, baseline is assuming that things are continuing as they may be, and amenity driven is a shift where we see a greater increase in second homes, partial time residents. So when we are looking at this, we are looking at kind of year-round population. And then city constrained, the last one is if there was some outside constraint that limited the ability of the city to grow, that brought down the rate of growth, what might we see? And you can see there's a range there of about 9,000 people over the next 20 years. One element that varies by function of the city is the service population. So because we have many destinations, MSU certainly is a good example where not only do people come to attend classes or to work, but there's also large events that are hosted there, maybe a basketball game, a football game, a concert, something like that. So when we have those kinds of events, it creates a service demand for our police and fire, water and sewer systems that are very different than what would be if we only looked at our number of people who were living here full time. And so when we look at service demand with the city, you may see very different projections depending on which service it is because of those kinds of nuances for who might be here, but only on a temporary basis. Looking at our population of growth per decade from the US Census, you can see there's quite a bit of variety there. The one on the far right with the pink stripes, that's an extrapolation what happens if the census data from the last 3 years show that continuing forward through the end of the year. Now, this is measuring a percentage, so a high percentage of a small number can be fewer real people than a lower percentage of a greater population, so we do need to keep that in mind. If you're interested in exploring more census-related information, the American Community Survey has a lot of detailed information on a lot of different topics, and it is the new lead function for the Census Bureau, looking at the details of the community. When we look at the national trends that may be affecting Montana and Bozeman, there's a couple of different things that might happen. On the right-hand side, you can see this is a population chart by age and sex from the U.S. Census Bureau, showing in 1 year increments from 1 year old to when people are no longer here. And then on the left-hand side is populations for Bozeman in 10-year brackets. You can clearly see the influence of Montana State University there in the 20 to 29-year bracket. And as a result of Montana State University's presence, Bozeman averages several years younger than Gallatin County overall. Some things to watch for as we look at that chart on the right-hand side, we see the younger populations are declining. When we think about what that means for MSU, for our local schools, for our park systems and other kinds of elements of the community, it does give us some long-range views of the things that may be coming. For example, ages that have the greatest share of the national population are those who are 33 and 34, add up to 1.74%. 1-year-olds is 1.06, so a significant difference in the younger ages. And we are seeing a lot of folks retiring and folks moving into that 65-year plus age. That's a nationwide trend that's going to be affecting us on a regular basis. So looking at the population, we then think about housing. And housing needs vary. It's an interesting thing because there's a lot of difference for how people might choose to live. Do they choose to live alone? Do they choose to live in shared housing of some sort? And so when we look at housing unit need, that doesn't necessarily match exactly to the population change because of that variability in housing choice. We've seen long-term trends with fewer people residing in a single home. And so that has modified not just the number count, but also we've seen a greater number of smaller homes being constructed in apartment complexes, things to address that housing preference. And as we look at distribution of housing throughout the community, this is from a building permit data dashboard. It was just released this spring. It provides ongoing data that the viewer can customize. You can select by dates and a variety of other ranges. The dark blue items are for new construction. The light blue are for some sort of renovation. Maybe it's a re-roof, maybe somebody did an addition to the home. So a lot of different kinds of things happening all throughout the city of Bozeman. We are starting to also see a greater increase in the number of small single home and duplex type lots coming in through the development review process. Places like Northwest Crossing, Turnrow Subdivision, Blackwood Groves are all developments that are bringing some of those kinds of lots onto the market that we hadn't seen for a while. So ebb and flow in housing types is pretty typical. The city continues to have a priority for middle housing, and we are seeing some of that reflecting in the construction permitting. And then kind of the last data piece, this item is available through our economic development program. They manage our community housing system, and it provides information on dedicated affordable housing projects that are in review. And the larger the circle, the more number of homes that are included. And then you can see things that are constructed, things that are in review, things that have finished the process. And if you choose to click on one of those circles, it brings up more details that relate to particular project. So what comes next? We are going to be expecting to release a draft document in mid-September. There will be formal hearings with the Community Development Board and City Commission. And the City Commission is the decision maker, so it's their authority to adopt the plan by resolution. And they can give direction for adjustments to it if they feel that that's an appropriate thing to do. So how do you follow the project and continue to engage? Engage.bozeman.net/community plan is the way that works. And we hope you take advantage of that, and we're glad to turn it over for some questions.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Tom Rogers here in the background. Just wanted to state, please, if you do have any questions, please just place those in the Q&A area. We'll be following along and happy to respond to any questions that we're able to at this time. But at the moment, Chris, we have no questions other than a few comments just saying thanks for the presentation. And we'll hold tight, allow you a chance to formalize a question. And we'll go from there, but thank you all for attending.
Hey, Tom, we do have someone raising their hand raised.
Emily, I think we'd like to manage the questions in writing.
Okay.
I think that's going to go smoothest with our time constraint.
Great.
So we've got a couple of questions. First one, I'll let Chris respond to here if he had a moment, is the most current version of the Unified Development Code draft. Where is it available? And I will add to the question and say, when might we see a revised version?
Okay. If you are interested in the current version of the draft, it is available at engage.bozeman.net/UDC. At the top of the page, when you open it up, there's a picture of the cover, and right underneath that is a copy of the draft, a copy of the draft map, or a link to both of those, and then there's also a link to the actual code that's in place today and operating. So all three of those are there. And as Tom mentioned, or was mentioned earlier, we're going to have a new draft in September, and we'll post that in the Engage Bozeman website as well. So I hope that answers the question. What's next?
Great. We've got a couple coming in here, Chris. I think the next one is there a way at this point to be both clear and concise of what level, what level of the updates would be required by the, MLUPA? Does that make sense? I think what's being asked is like, what really needs to be done to meet the standard of what's being imposed by the state?
Okay. There is some new material that has not previously needed to be addressed at all in the city's land use planning. Examples, schools and solid waste are two things that we never had to deal with before. We do have to deal with now. So we will be collecting information, including that information as part of the appendices and the materials in support. Interestingly enough, we're needing to gather information about the schools, but we have no regulatory authority to tell the schools how to operate the school districts. They're their own selves. That's different from many states where the cities actually run the schools. But for us, it's a little different.
Thank you, Chris. And next question here is really given the public engagement associated with the UDC update. Are there themes that emerged that would be best addressed with updates to the growth policy concurrent with the UDC update?
Okay, good question. That becomes a judgment call to some degree about how far we try to adjust the document now. There is an opportunity for the commission to give direction for a more comprehensive update at their leisure. That really becomes a budgetary question and a priorities question. When we do those plans, they run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars and a great number of staff hours. So if the commission wished to prioritize that, they certainly could. Staff's understanding of the direction is to focus at this stage on truly a technical compliance to state law. And so we're keeping it pretty minimal just to address those kinds of things. As I mentioned, there's some specific adjustments that we will need to make to update statistics, to update boundaries that have changed, like the city limits. We're not planning on making adjustments to the planning boundary itself. Those kinds of things, that would be a much broader conversation we would need to have with the community, and we just don't think there's time to have that conversation.
Got a couple more here spooled up, but the next one is, I think they're asking, can we, in combination of like kind of land use analysis and how much land we need for a variety of uses, but with the UDC update, can we show what zoning is being changed? And I think that we can, but partly by our current and proposed zoning map. And if you'd like to just remind folks where they can find that information and what any update will be. And then I've got another question spooled up after that.
Okay. The land use plan itself does not change zoning. So we will have a document format yet to be determined that identifies where things changed with the future land use map. We have found a couple of technical flaws where a boundary didn't follow the right location. It jumped a property line or something like that. And so we will have that available for full disclosure when we release the document. The zoning change would happen through the UDC adjustment on the Unified Development Code website on Engage Bozeman. There is a link right under the cover shown on the first page that allows you to do a comparison of existing zoning to proposed zoning, parcel by parcel, if you want to do that. So that's the best tool to look at those kinds of things. We have had some work sessions related to zoning, and the commission has given us some direction to make some adjustments. And so we also will be bringing back some documentation for what changed between the draft that was released in October of 24 and the draft that gets released in September next month. So hopefully that provides the information folks are looking for.
Thank you, Chris. Next question here. Could you opine or elaborate on the public process related to MLUPA in relation to how people participate with plan updates, zoning updates, and then even public notices for more specific projects?
Okay, sure. That's a multi-part question because the law is changing as we speak. When MLUPA was first adopted, it took a very strong stance on when and where and how public engaged and put much more emphasis on the front end of the process, growth policy, zoning adoption, things like that, compared with individual sites, a subdivision, a site plan, something like that. That was challenged in court. It's still in court. It's up at the Supreme Court now. We do not have a schedule for when that decision might come down. In the meantime, the 2025 legislature modified the law and put in a specific notice process and specific public participation process for individual site developments. And they drew a line in two ways. One is they created something called a ministerial permit, where basically noticing is not required at all. And then there was everything else. And with the everything else, that might be a subdivision, it might be a site plan, a variance, something like that. There is a requirement to provide notice, and that participation is by written comment. So that is being incorporated into the Unified Development Code, since those statutes primarily drive that process there. With the land use plan level engagement, there's two things that are required in statute. One is the city commission has to approve a public engagement plan. So before anything starts, city commission gets to look at that and say, all right, how are we going to engage with the public? What are the tools we're going to use? And then that becomes the blueprint for the process. We can always go above and beyond that, but that sets the floor. Related to that, and part of that is there has to be an electronic means of distributing information and collecting comments. That's brand new, never been in the statute before. States describing both some process and some of the mechanics of doing it. So the website that's been created helps meet that electronic method of distribution, and then the city has the existing process for comments at bozeman.net for people to submit written comments on any project or other city action, and that covers the other side of it. I hope that made sense.
Well, we've exhausted the questions that I see here, at least from my perspective on the list. Got a few minutes left, so if anybody has some additional thoughts or questions, please offer, and we'll respond again the best we can.
While we're waiting for that, just a thank you again to everybody who took their time to spend their lunch hour with us. Appreciate your willingness to listen and learn. And again, this was recorded, so we will be posting it on our Engaged page if you wanted to go back and listen to anything, or you wanted to share it with anyone. We will be sharing this similar information tomorrow night at the commission meeting, third on the agenda. We'll be sharing an in-person version of this at a info session at the library on Wednesday, the 27th at 6 p.m. And again, with our community development board on September 8th. Last chance for questions in the chat.
I do have one more, less of a question, but more of kind of a suggestion or a statement for as we get further along adoption process and things get tight, all tight and buttoned up, doing a follow-up webinar or webinars at some point to just show how all of this process works and then how things have changed. And great idea.
Okay. And we can certainly take that as advisement.
Do you see another question at the
I guess
end?
one question
Just, yeah, we do have another kind of comment here of if people do not agree with some of the long-term themes and objectives of the plan, the community plan, can they suggest changes?
Okay. The short answer is yes. Folks, this is an open opportunity. Folks can make any suggestion they choose. It is ultimately the decision of the city commission to decide if those can realistically be met in the kind of degree of public engagement that the community expects between now and when we need to complete this process, or if it would be better to address those as a part of a more comprehensive evaluation of the document. I guess one thing I'd toss out for folks that maybe think about and give us a comment later. There's been some suggestions over the years about, could the city do a video series or something like that that explains different elements of the development process or the public engagement process. We're certainly happy to do webinars. Wondering, they tend to be a little bit longer. We're wondering about more of a short form, 5 to 10 minutes most on an individual topic. If folks think that would be beneficial, that would be a nice thing for us to know so we can think about how to fit that into the workflow.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for taking your time today. And reminder to follow the Engage page for this project as well as the UDC project for updates and information. And we hope that this was informative for all of you.
Thank you, everyone.